Tackle today, Matt and Mark Justice from Tackle Trading to bring you all the charts, the news, the analysis, so you can be informed in your trading day in just a few minutes. Apple gets a downgrade. The market's in consolidation. Oil still being frisky. Dollar taking a little pause. We're going to break it all down for you today. Matt, not a lot of economic or major news to head into the week. Still in consolidation. What do you see from a technical perspective?
Yeah, nothing. Just early in the week so far, nothing really has changed. A little bit of a downward pressure in price today, but it was just kind of overnight price action. Nothing to be too concerned about. Just dojiing here today. Not a lot of actual big macro market news coming in over the weekend to price in. There was quite a bit of upgrades and downgrades in the market here today, but not a lot of macro data to really kind of drive the market. And so a little bit of hesitation, just hovering right above that 9 EMA, right below that multiple time frame breakout. And when you're looking at the other indexes, you're really not seeing anything too dissimilar. A little bit of further downward pressure on price on RSP. That's because the Qs are outperforming a little bit here today, specifically semiconductors, NVIDIA, Broadcom, some of the software companies in tech doing pretty decent here today. And so tech outperforming a little bit here today, but nothing too great, I would say, but a little bit of an inside candle.
It's one of those. Take a note. They're outperforming today. We'll see if it develops into anything, but nothing actionable as far as rotation.
No, it's more than anything. You got some positive news coming out on some follow through on that NVIDIA news from last Friday, where they were talking about insane demand on their Blackwell chip, and so NVIDIA is getting a little bit of follow through love here, and that's kind of what's leading the semiconductors. You also had one of the semiconductors get upgraded here today. I'm thinking about it off the top of my head. It wasn't one of the major ones. NXP semiconductor got upgraded today, and UBS basically said they were best in class from a margin perspective. And so you got an upgrade on NXP, and then you had some follow through momentum on NVIDIA here. NVIDIA looks pretty good on a potential breakout scenario. So you do have some relative outperformance on the Qs, but I wouldn't say it's anything it's something to highlight.
It's not like RSP
about it tomorrow and the next day, because the first time we saw it really was on Friday, right? We saw a little bit of a relative outperformance on Friday due to the NVIDIA news. You're seeing a little bit here today, but again, I wouldn't take too much of it. It's just if we start seeing more and more, we're obviously thinking about a theme beginning here.
Yeah, and in real tech leadership, we've seen this in the last couple of years where RSP's down, but tech's up, right? Like, this is more at the edges, edges right now. And we talked about a lot of things in the Trading Justice podcast, the technical situation, all of that stuff. Be sure to check that out. Matt, you mentioned that with not a lot of macro drivers to price in at the start of the week, not a lot of economic news today. We do have a lot of Fed speakers. Now, it's going to be very interesting what the message is on Fed speakers, because we had really hot economic data. We talked about this in the Trading Justice podcast released yesterday. A very clear narrative that recession postponed, apocalypse avoided. What do those Fed speakers give us on future hikes? We'll see. But the big reports this week are the inflationary reports on Thursday and Friday. Fed minutes might be interesting for like 14 seconds on Wednesday, but those inflationary numbers are the big highlight from an economic standpoint this week, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are. CPI report on Thursday, Friday with the PPI report, but expectations are lowered coming into this week on the CPI report. We talked about the CPI report, the inflationary situation in a little bit of detail during the Trading Justice podcast that was released yesterday. We also did an earnings preview in that as well, as long with our market skyline, went through all the commodities. So definitely check that out. But as of today, no. And as of the environment this week, it's certainly an important week when you have CPI data coming into the market and Fed minutes, but the Fed minutes aren't going to tell us that much in my estimation. CPI report is expected to come in at 2.3% year over year. PPI report was looking at a little bit of a drop too as well. So it's an important week, but it's not on the level of last week.
No, most certainly not. But what will be on the importance in the coming week is earnings. We don't have any earnings to report today, I believe, but that is going to be in this section. We'll be highlighting the key earnings report each day as they come out. But what do you have for us today, Matt?
Yeah, I got a couple stocks, and again, not a lot of earnings. That
Some
doesn't
bigger
kick it
names
off.
there. Some bigger names
Yes,
there.
there are, but a lot of upgrades and downgrades here today in the market. Apple got a downgrade out of Jefferies. This was the second concerning downgrade out of Wall Street on Apple, citing pretty much the exact same thing, talking about how this new iPhone, even though it's going to have AI features in it, it's not ready for prime time from an AI perspective. And Jefferies is looking at 26, maybe even coming into 27. Which is about 2 years away from the AI perspective. And just one word on that, I would agree with that. I don't believe the first edition of any technology with new tech in it is going to be the absolute most effective and efficient. It's going to take some time. There's no doubt about that. And where AI is going to be in 2 years from now is infinitely further down the road than it is today. There's no doubt about that. So Jeffrey's citing some common concerns on that, but chasing a downgrade, in my opinion, as well. Interesting out of the Apple downgrade, Jeffries raised their price target. So they downgraded the stock from buy to hold, but they raised their price target as well. So an interesting downgrade
Little
on
cake
Apple.
in hat, like
A little bit of a little bit, yeah, a little bit, yeah. Amazon, they also had a downgrade this time out of Wells Fargo, citing moving them to an equal weight, and they talked about citing margin pressures going into the holiday season. Had a little bit of concern on the growth component of the cloud AWS. So they did downgrade that as well. They also cut the price target down to 183. And then Pfizer in the news a little bit here today. And so there was like 3 analysts came out today talking about how they had some concerns on the growth side of Pfizer, not necessarily a downgrade specifically, just a little bit of concern. The interesting thing is Pfizer's got some interesting technical environments to talk about. When you're looking at Apple, when you're looking at Amazon, when you're looking at Pfizer today, not a lot of changes on Apple. It's kind of hovering against that all-time high pricing. It's real choppy, not a clean environment on Apple right now, as it does go in to earnings environment in a couple weeks from now. Amazon also showing a little bit of downward pressure in price, pretty much neutral over the course of the last 3 to 4 months. Looking at a little bit of a pullback scenario, has some support, really important support right around 180. And so it was looking pretty good, quite frankly, up until today. The gap down did throw a wrench in that analysis. But if you hold here at 180, you go back up and you reclaim those moving averages, that's going to be a much improved look for Amazon, but it's got a little bit of work to do. And then on Pfizer here, you're just talking about a little bit of a reversal type situation. Pfizer has some overhead that is extremely powerful right around the $30 mark. It's tried to break out of that multiple different times, has not been able to carry anything above 30. And the one time it did was on earnings. And so that's a little bit of a different conversation. A break of 30 with some sustained momentum could be an interesting technical conversation on old Pfizer, but it certainly has got work to do, and it's most likely going to be a post-earnings conversation. That's what we got for stocks in the news here today.
One of the big stories of last week was the big move up in the dollar. Also for us, and we talked about in this podcast, gold holding its own in a week where you had a big week in the dollar. Matt, break down the commodity charts for us.
Yeah, dollar had a historic week last week, just up every day. Every candle was big, and a lot of momentum, and more momentum than we anticipated. But the commodity side of the equation held firm very well. It's not necessarily at a resistance level right now. You're just overextended in the immediate short term. And what you are seeing here today is that first data point of slowing momentum. We're looking for a pivot formation coming back to the downside, because if we do get that pivot come back down to the downside, certainly there's a tremendous amount of moving averages to catch anything coming too far down, but you get that pivot, the commodity side looks pretty good. Gold hovering just in that consolidation high base, nothing to be too concerned about. When you look at silver, still kind of hovering against that breakout channel, especially when you look at the ETF SLV. You can see that breakout channel still at 29.5, still that close above 29.5. Very important. It's only tested above that 29.5 level one time. It tested above it on Friday's news. then it came right back down, a little bit under pressure here today, but it doesn't change the overall pattern going into that 29.5 level. A close would be very, very good on silver. When you're looking at the copper side of the equation, still a little bit of volatility here, and it's one of the things I haven't loved about this move technically, quite frankly, is a little too much fighting at the very top of the trend. I want to see slowing momentum more than anything at the top end of a trend, top end of a parabolic move. You want to see that get digested. I just don't feel we've seen that slowing momentum. Look for a little bit of a pullback, maybe down to the 4.4 range.
Yeah, no, listen, we're going to, did you give us crude oil?
Oh, crude oil obviously showing its bull horns here today as we're seeing that upward movement in price. Energy is one of the better performing sectors, if not the best performing sector here today. But interesting one note, don't want to stay on it too far here, but it's just one day, but one day does kind of start it's the beginning point of something.
We talked about this in the podcast, how Bitcoin doesn't counter trend, and today it is.
But one day, just one day, we're seeing Ethereum up here today. We're seeing Bitcoin up today while the market is down. Does that lead to a changing in characteristics? Maybe, but one day I'm still dubious.
The great movie Major League told us we need 3 to make it a streak, but we'll count it as 1 and get optimistic. Listen, we're going to have a continued conversation on all those commodity charts, an area of extreme focus, semiconductors, and much, much more in our Traders Lounge coming up. You can join that Traders Lounge by signing up for a 15-day free trial, tackletrading.com.